From the Toronto Star, I'm Reggie Mudler, and this matters. That's what Jose Bautista's bat flip sounded like after he hit a 3-run homer in the American League Divisional Series in 2015. With an epic throw of his bat, an iconic Toronto sports moment was born. As this year's edition of the Blue Jays start to play spring training games, Toronto baseball fans have what is sometimes a rare combination when looking at this team: an abundance of hope, and even better, something concrete to base it on. Could more unforgettable moments be in store? With some high-profile additions, a core group of young stars, and ownership opening up the purse strings, the Jays could be on to the start of something special. Gregor Chisolm and Mike Wilner are the Star's baseball columnists. They are here to talk about these new-look Blue Jays. Mike, as you are new, welcome to the Star family. But to both of you gentlemen, I would like to give you a hearty welcome to This Matters. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, you live and breathe this stuff, and I'm excited as I am a Toronto sports fan. And so I need to start very, very generally. Why and how excited should fans be about this team, particularly those that have probably not been paying attention at all so far?
I mean, I think fans should be pretty excited. You know, the Blue Jays made the playoffs last year, and yes, it was an expanded playoff field, but they've improved over the offseason, and the teams that they were chasing, a couple of them took significant steps back in the offseason, like Tampa Bay and Cleveland. So I think the outlook is quite bright. They signed the most coveted free agent of the offseason. And, you know, Gregor wrote about this, but they made some serious improvements to the bullpen. I think expectations should be high. And I see this team being in the playoff race from day one and probably making it to the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the first time since 2016 you could really even say that, too. I mean, that was the last time the Blue Jays made the postseason and really the last realistic shot that this team had at being a contender. And, you know, the interesting thing compared to the last run the Blue Jays had in 2015 and 2016, that team was set up to contend over a very short period of time. It wasn't built to be sustainable over the long haul. That's different from this time around. I mean, the young core that is in place with this team right now is going to be here for a number of years. So we've seen the Blue Jays go kind of all in years past. That's not really the case this time. This should attract some of the casual fans. There's reasons to tune into this team. But this core that you see here today is going to be the core over the next few years as well. So while this is supposed to be a contending year, it's still also a building year, because while good things are expected this year, you know, I think even better things are expected next year and the year beyond. So this is a team that fans should be able to follow over the long haul, as opposed to maybe tuning in really quickly over a 2-month span like they did in 2015 when things got exciting for a short period of time.
Okay. Mike, you mentioned it, so actually we're going to go to Gregor first on this. George Springer. How good is this guy? And more importantly, what does this signing mean for the Jays and the front office?
Well, for $150 million, I hope he's pretty good. He's easily, obviously, one of the top free agents out there. To me, he was a perfect fit for this team because, you know, there's a lot of young offensive stars, Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero, Kevin Biggio on this roster. What the team didn't have was a long-term solidifying kind of presence in center field.
You know, I'm not going to put a finger on any one thing. You know, I'm just going to try and do my job. And, you know, I'm going to try and help whichever way I can and, you know, hopefully lead by example. You know, just go out and play as hard as I possibly can every day. And that's understanding, you know, that I'm going to fail. Don't try to do too much. Don't try to show emotion a lot. But you know what? Just go out and have fun, enjoy the game, and play how I want to play and play how I know how to play. And, you know, we'll see what happens.
They needed to go out and get that through free agency because there wasn't really many options out there. There was really only one guy that really fit that mold too. And so to me, it's telling that the Blue Jays were willing to make that financial commitment. You know, we've heard from Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins over the years that, you know, these spendings were going to come in waves. We saw the first wave last year with Hyunjin Ryu. This year, we saw it with Marcus Semien and George Springer. Next year, there's supposed to be even more. So Springer's probably, you know, at the top end of that. That's probably as good as they're going to get. But, you know, it's the kind of ad that the Blue Jays really, really needed offensively and defensively as well. So while the Blue Jays still need pitching, that's still an issue, and it's going to be an issue throughout the year. Offensively, this team is shaping up to be one of the best in baseball, and Springer is going to be at the top of that list in terms of contributors.
Mike, I want to actually go to the other thing, the other reason why there has been excitement about this team. And also, I got a couple pet peeves with you guys. I used to be a sports media writer. The Core 4, is that the nickname? We're talking about these next-gen kids. I think there needs to be a better nickname for them, but, their development last season kind of started this, the ball rolling. Where are they all at right now?
Well, I have to say, I tried to get Bovlaggio going last year or the year before, and it just didn't take off.
I can see why.
Somebody said to me, it's not delivery, it's Bovlaggio. And I said, all right, that's the end of that. But you can't steal Core 4 from, the Yankees of the late 90s. I think that the general consensus is that Bichette and Guerrero will probably separate themselves from Biggio at some point in time. Like Gregor said, there's a lot of kids who are going to be here for a while. And when you get down to it, it may wind up that Bichette, Guerrero, Nate Pearson, and Simeon Woods-Richardson will wind up being the core of the next really great Blue Jays team. So I don't know that the core has emerged yet to the point where it could get a nickname. There's potentially the Legacies or something like that because they're all sons of really, really good former major leaguers, a couple of whom were in the Hall of Fame. But it's a living thing, this core. It's growing and changing as the years go by. And again, I go back to something Gregor said when he was talking about George Springer, that this is a contending year, but it's also a building year. The Blue Jays still have a top 5 farm system in the major leagues, and they can use that to augment what's here and to add maybe some more core players. So I think the surface is just being scratched of how good this team can be, and we will definitely get to some good nicknames soon enough.
We'll be right back. Is there a lot of pressure this year on Vlad Guerrero Jr. to break out? We're all expecting it. Is this the year?
I think there is. I mean, it's not a boom or bust year for him by any means, but at the same time, I mean, he came up at, the same time that a lot of these other young offensive stars throughout the league came up. And a lot of those guys have really kind of jumped to the surface and stolen the spotlight to a certain extent, like Fernando Tatis Jr. in San Diego. And we haven't quite seen, obviously, Vladimir Guerrero live up to those expectations. And some of that had to do with his previous conditioning. Last offseason, we were talking about many of the same things we were talking about this offseason in the terms of he needed to get into better shape. He really needed to recommit himself to the defensive side of the game and just putting himself in a position to succeed. And we heard that in the past, and it didn't really happen, not to the extent that the club said it was going to. This offseason seems to be a bit different. I mean, he reported to camp in much better shape. He's dropped a lot of weight.
Quickness, weight loss, balance, strength. I work everything at the same time. I want to make sure that all parts of my game were ready. But yeah, we very focused on the weight loss. And as of right now, I lost 42 pounds.
It's really time for him to fulfill those expectations. And, there's been a lot of issues with his mechanics at the plate, not getting enough lift on the ball at times. He's always hit the ball hard at this level, but the production just hasn't really been there. And so, at some point in time, he needs to take that step forward. And it seems like Bo Bichette has kind of edged him out a little bit over their first debuts with the Blue Jays. But I'm certainly not ready to write off Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, he was one of the most hyped prospects in baseball history for a reason. It's because he has all the tools. I think he's going to figure it out at some point in time. But if it doesn't happen this year, then those questions are only going to grow louder. So I think it's fair to say that there is a lot of pressure on him to perform, especially on a team now that has heightened expectations. So really across the board, more is going to be expected from these guys because people aren't going to be satisfied with losses the way they were before. There's going to be increased scrutiny on this team like there hasn't been in the last couple of years. And Guerrero is certainly going to face that as well.
But he doesn't have to be a main cog in the wheel, which I think is going to be helpful for him. I mean, he's still 21 years old for another 3 weeks, right? And for his career, he's been an above average major league hitter, as much as people want to say he's been a disappointment. Like at age 20 and 21, he's posted an OPS that's 9% above the major league average for his career. So I feel like I'm not going to write him off until he's 25 and not producing. And meanwhile, he's producing. But like Gregor said, he came up with so much hype. And before the season, even Fangraphs, which is a very highly respected, I was going to say publication, but website, suggested that in 2019, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would be one of the top 10 hitters overall in the major leagues. And that's because that's what the scouting told us. And I wonder if Fernando Tatis, and not the contract, but the attention that he's getting and the love he's getting and how much people are talking about him, and to a lesser extent Bo Bichette, because he's been the guy on the Blue Jays when Vladdy thought he was going to be. I wonder if Tatis and Bichette wind up being the inspiration to Vlad. Vlad's getting into shape and he's losing weight and he's paying a lot more attention to his conditioning because he knows that he can be as good as these guys. And maybe he's looking over and see, I want some of that attention. I want people talking about me like that.
Well, I have to say, using publication, you're clearly in a newspaper state of mind. We like that. Now, let's move to the mound. Pitching. This is something that teams live and die by. Hyun-Jin Ryu is the ace. There are questions about his durability. Gregor, let's start with you. You already said that there's probably going to be questions all year long. Is this one of these things where we're probably looking at a lot of 9-7 games in this team's future? Or do you think this is going to sort itself out?
Yeah, no, I think there's going to be a lot of high-scoring games this year. And as you kind of touched on, pitching often wins. The Blue Jays are going with a bit of a different approach. And there wasn't really much in the market in offseason in terms of high-level pitching. It was Trevor Bauer, and then there really wasn't much else on top of that. And so I think the Blue Jays kind of tried to leverage the market to the best of their advantage. And they looked at their opportunities, and they could have added some middling starting pitchers, or they could have gone kind of all in on the offensive side and tried to win things there. And so they did a bit of a combination of the two. There were upgrades available in the bullpen. Their bullpen should be better than it was last year, and it was pretty good last year. The offense is going to carry the load. That starting rotation is going to be an issue for most of the year. And to me, it's not whether or not they have enough starting pitching to make a deep run into the postseason, because I don't think they do. I think that's pretty obvious. The question to me is whether or not they have enough pitching to get, midway through the year before they can make a couple of adds, similar to what they did last year at the trade deadline when they added Robbie Ray and Taijuan Walker. This team is going to be in the market for similar type moves this year. So the pitching staff that you see end the year, I highly doubt is going to be the one that you're seeing right now. Pitching is going to be a problem. And, the good news for Toronto is that they do have a lot of young pitching prospects along the way. So I think one of the hesitation that this team had was they didn't want to overly commit long-term to pitching, because there are spots that are going to need to be made available to the guys coming up. As Mike touched on, Simeon Woods Richardson is a top prospect who's coming quickly. Those are guys who are going to be around 2022 and beyond. And so it's kind of a short-term fix for the pitching for now. And then I think they can reassess in the offseason as they try to add another high-profile arm.
And I think in season, they'll try to add another high-profile arm too, like Gregor touched on with Taijuan Walker and Robbie Ray. I'm not necessarily of the belief that they don't have enough starting pitching to get into a deep playoff run, because I see the playoffs as kind of a real crapshoot with so many off days built in. You don't really need great starting pitching if you have a terrific bullpen, and the Blue Jays could potentially have a terrific bullpen. But I was just looking it up, and last year, even the worst team in baseball as far as runs allowed didn't allow 6 runs a game. So, I've heard a lot of people say, they're going to have to win 9-7, win 11-10 on all those games. Yeah, they're going to be high scoring games for sure, but this team isn't going to allow on average 5.5 runs a game. It'll be better than that. They're not going to score 8 either, although they have a pretty terrific offense. But I go back to, again, what Gregor wrote about how the bullpen is going to have to carry the load. And this has a chance to be a really, really, really good bullpen with Kirby Yates and Jordan Romano and Rafael Dolis and Ryan Baraki and Tyler Chatwood and Julian Merriweather, all these big, huge arms at the back of the pen. I really think that's going to help out a lot.
Yeah, and I think fans who haven't necessarily tuned in the last couple of years are going to see a much different kind of brand of baseball. Oh, this Blue Jays team is going to play differently than the teams in 2015, 2016, and before that. Outside of Hyun-Jin Ryu, who's probably going to go 6 innings on most starts, the guys in the rotation aren't going to be pitching deep into games. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of games where you see guys taken out in the 4th or 5th to get into that deep bullpen that Mike's talking about. And so, the days of guys going 7 and 8 innings are pretty much over in this city, at least for now, until they bring in some new pitchers. These guys, the expectations should be a little bit lower. They don't need to go as deep. They're going to hand things over to that bullpen to rely on that strength a lot quicker. So for those guys, it's really just getting through those initial early stages of the game.
Okay, so here's another thing right now. Basically, all Toronto teams are on endless road trips. So these guys, are they settling into Dunedin for the season? Do we know that? And I mean, how much of that is that going to be a factor for them?
Most of them live around there, right? So I think it's just going to be almost an extended spring training while the Jays are in Dunedin through April and probably May before they move up to Buffalo and then hopefully get to Toronto by September. But I wonder what Gregor thinks about this, because I think it's more of a factor for the visiting teams. We saw the Yankees complain about Buffalo and how they didn't have the amenities that they're used to. I wonder how the visiting teams are going to handle being in Dunedin. And maybe by the time they get their heads around it, the series is over and the Blue Jays have snuck 2 out of 3 out of them.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. And certainly I think it will be a factor for the visiting team. And for the Blue Jays, I think this situation is a lot better than what they dealt with last year. I mean, let's not forget that, Buffalo wasn't even a given until the season was already underway. The Blue Jays were playing home games in Washington at the start of the year. So the players for the first little bit of the season, they packed their bags and they had no idea where they were going 2 weeks from now. This situation this year is different. They reported to camp. Some guys, I guess, were probably already there, but for the most part, camp hadn't officially opened yet. They got word that they're going to be down there for at least a month and a half. Guys were already preparing to go down there anyways. It's a familiar setting for them. So it's not quite Toronto, but I think it's a big upgrade over having to uproot and go to Buffalo on very short notice and not really knowing what's going on. And so there are going to be problems later on if they eventually have to transition to Buffalo. There's going to be a bit of an adjustment there. But I think Mike is right. There is a little bit of advantage for the Blue Jays in terms of that familiarity that they have with the ballpark, familiar settings, and whereas some of these other teams come in and it really is a bit of a different world. The Yankees in particular last year, I think their jaw kind of dropped when they went into Buffalo. A lot of other teams were completely fine with everything that was going on, and they were kind of looking at that place as the AAA ballpark that it was. So look, the Blue Jays have to leverage the situations wherever they can, and that's certainly one of them.
Those big shot Yankees. So, guys, I know you've been peppered with all sorts of questions. I kind of want to open this up because, and I'll be honest, I can talk to you guys for hours. What's an X factor? What is something that people are not talking about? Is it, the sort of fact that the AL East is on a little bit of a downward spiral? Or, what do you think, people aren't talking about that maybe they should be or should be excited about with this team? Open the floor to you guys. You know what? Mike, we'll start with you.
I was going to think about my answer while Gregor was giving his. I write off Tampa Bay every year, and every year they surprise me, and they've done it with pitching, and they've done it with defense and speed and all these things that have sort of fallen out of favor. So I'm reluctant to say, hey, just because they lost their best pitcher, Blake Snell, and Charlie Morton, who was their best pitcher the year before, that they're going to slip back, even though I think they're going to. Boston's terrible. Baltimore's terrible. So the American League East is really almost there for the taking. The Yankees, we think the Blue Jays pitching rotation is shaky. The Yankees pitching rotation is held together by like Garrett Cole's spit and chicken wire, and that's it. So, they're vulnerable too. But I really think it's more about just being able to see great offense again. And it's going to be a different kind of great offense than we saw in 15 and 16. In 2015, Jose Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion, and Josh Donaldson combined to hit 120 home runs. They've tinkered with the baseball this year, so I don't think any trio of Jays is going to hit 120 home runs, though the power is certainly there with some of these guys, with Springer, with Vlad, with Teoscar Hernandez, even with Lourdes Gurriel Jr. There's a lot of things to be excited about. I'm kind of excited to see if Teoscar Hernandez, someone who we haven't talked about, who was a Silver Slugger last year, can continue this metamorphosis into the Edwin Encarnacion of the 20s, because that's what he's been since the All-Star break of 2019. And yet he's a guy who's incredibly streaky and for his whole career had this roller coaster of numbers. And he didn't have time to get on the down slope of the roller coaster last year because the season was so short. So there are a lot of, is this guy for real questions, Rowdy Tellez among them as well. But I think for the most part, it's just going to be just enjoy Vlad and Bo and Springer and Biggio and what's going to be a really, really fun offense to watch all year long.
It's funny Mike brings up Teoscar Hernandez because he was my X Factor pick last year. And usually exclusively my X Factor picks are on the offensive side, position player. But, in the past, I think the Blue Jays needed everything to break right. They needed almost everything to go well in order to contend. At least offensively, I think this year is a little bit different. They don't need to hit on every single guy. There's enough depth there that they can get away with a down season or two from a player in their lineup. So to me, even though we've talked about it a lot, the X factor to me is just that overall bullpen, and particularly the middle innings. Kirby Yates coming over from San Diego a couple years ago was one of the top closers in baseball.
I think I was looking for just a place where I could go and kind of be myself And, before we ever opened negotiations with anybody, I was definitely attracted to the Blue Jays. Kind of that excitement of a young team and, kind of where you see that trajectory going. I guess it definitely, caught my eye, and I definitely was interested in being a part of it. I'm very, very happy that it all kind of worked out and we were able to line up and get a deal done. And, I'm very, very excited for this opportunity.
If healthy, I think we kind of know what to expect from him. The middle, as much as we're talking it up, the middle of that bullpen really, really needs to come through, because we've already talked about the weaknesses in the rotation. The bullpen's going to need to be there to help pick things up. So whether it's guys like Tyler Chatwood, Rafael Dolis had a very good year for the Blue Jays last year. They need him in a similar type role this year. They really need those 1 to 2 inning guys who are coming in to bridge the gap to the Jordan Romano and Kirby Yates at the back end of the bullpen. I think that's where a lot of games this year are going to be won and lost. So there's not one guy down there necessarily that's an X factor to me. Instead, it's an entire group. And there's some depth down there, so the Blue Jays can afford some failure to kind of get around that. But at the same time, they need at least a couple of those new recruits this year to really solidify things down there and kind of round out the pitching staff to kind of compensate for some of their weaknesses elsewhere.
Guys, this has been fantastic for us. I'll be quite honest. I could pepper you guys with questions all day. One, the legend of Alejandro Kirk. Is he the next Babe Ruth? We're going to save that for next time. But I also just wanted to say there is quite nothing like the Rogers Center, which will always be the Sky Dome to me, on a beautiful summer day with an exciting team to watch. Gentlemen, I really, really want to thank you for your time today and for giving me, a Toronto sports fan, some hope. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's our pleasure.
Gregor Chisolm and Mike Wilner are the Star's baseball columnists. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Rajin Budler, Adrian Chung, and Saba Etisaz. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.